Hello, my name is Raj Shah, and I'm the publisher and managing editor of Desh-Videsh Media and Desh-Videsh Magazine. Today, we have one guest, and in this particular subject, I needed help, as a moderator, so I also have a co-moderator. Let me first introduce to our guest speaker, Komal Shah. Komal Shah is an educational consultant and a thought leader on a mission to transform the world through conscious education. Having spent 5 years as a middle school educator with Teach for America, Komal's passion was born from watching the broken system produce unfulfilled children. She wanted more for her students and the education system as a whole. To pursue this, Komal received her MBA at USC Marshall School of Business. Now she brings a unique perspective and a powerful approach to education reform. She is an author of recently published book titled Raise Your Hand, a call for consciousness in education. In addition to having a passion for education, Komal enjoys connecting with nature, spending time with the loved ones, Kundalini yoga, Bollywood dance, and curling up with a good book. Welcome, Komal, and thank you for your time.
Of course, thank you for having me. And I like the introduction. I also like that you told people what I like to do in my spare time.
Of course. Now let me introduce to my co-moderator, but she's also going to share her views about the subject which we are going to talk today. Her name is Rama Deo. She's a cybersecurity and a compliance specialist, as well as owner and managing director at 24/7 Security Incorporated. Prior to being an entrepreneur, she had spent numerous years working in different roles at Citigroup in the risk technology area. She is a mother of 2 college freshmen and was, until last year, a member of Board of Trustee at North Broward Preparatory School. Thank you very much, Rama.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. Pleasure to meet you as well, Komal.
Yes, nice to meet you as well.
Let's start. I know some of the things which we're going to talk about your book, but we may have some specific question, especially right now, as I mentioned to you on the phone, is right now all the seniors, are getting ready, for applying in the college and so forth. And that includes one of my grandchildren occasion.
Yeah.
But first, we'll kind of start with your book. So the first question is, your book is called Raise Your Hand, a call for consciousness in education. Mm-hmm. What do you mean by consciousness in education?
That is a good question, and one I get all the time. So this is good to actually talk about it. So when I talk about consciousness, one, I say it as a way of life, but in terms of education, it's just a state of awareness. It's a state of understanding, and it's a state of being very present. And the reason why I bring it up is because when I taught in an underserved community. So a lot of my students were undergoing, a lot of circumstances in their own families, poverty, gang violence, community violence. There was a lot of trauma happening in the community that I was working in. And what I realized is in our education system, we push a lot of test scores, grades, going to a good college, getting a job, and that is what success looks like. But sometimes we forget the kid for who they are right in that moment, the needs that they need right now. We're always pushing them for what's next instead of pushing them for what they need in that moment. And for me, it was hard because I was working with over 700 students in 5 years, and I'm going, what we're doing is not okay because my student is crying to me right now, and I'm telling her to sit down and learn this math equation. So something is wrong. Something is not working. And I will say something, my parents are from India. So I grew up as an immigrant child, and, education was number one priority. You get good grades, you go to a good college. So I am a product of that, of thinking that is the way the system should be. And then when I taught my students, that's when I started questioning that maybe what we're doing is actually not good for all kids. And a lot of times we ask children to conform to a system instead of asking the system to conform to our children and their individual needs. And so I'm hoping that we can start becoming more conscious as teachers, parents, as adults in the education system, of how can we bring awareness of ourselves, of what we think education should be, what success actually looks like, what is the purpose of education, and start bringing some of that awareness into the school system. And so that's my vision, and it's one that takes a lot of unlearning and reflection, and it's hard, but I think it's really necessary because we're in a mental health crisis, and I think our children deserve much more than what we're giving them.
And in, and in fact, it's even more so, right? I mean, the mental health crisis right now, it's probably even exacerbated because of COVID-19.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a lot of parents are concerned about learning loss with COVID and, with this pandemic and with all the different learning processes that people have taken, so that schools have had to implement. So what advice would you give those parents?
My first thing would be take a deep breath. They're going to be okay. Then I would tell them this. One, instead of looking at learning loss, look at what your child has gained, because that's the first place to start. A lot of children have gained a lot more independence. For the first time, they have gained what it's like to have their own schedule. It's for the first time they've learned how to use technology in a way they've never been asked to use before. So maybe they've become more connected with their brother or sister because now they're at home with them, where before they were in separate schools, right? So there's a lot of gains, and I think parents should start with that. Then I think the second thing is emotional loss. And I think that's actually where we need to start with our kids. A lot of parents, when I spoke to them, they said, my kids not socializing, they're isolated, they're in their room on Zoom calls for 6 hours. I'm really concerned. I want them to go play, and I'm scared. And I would say that's so normal, and that's okay. And I would say we as adults, we all have had emotional loss this past year and a half. So what are our kids going through? Let's start there. Let's start having conversations with them about their emotions, and not telling them it's going to be fine, it's going to be okay. Instead going, that's okay that you feel that way. Because guess what? I feel like that too sometimes. And this is hard. And this is not easy. So I think we forget the emotional loss. And, for any of us, when we're going through something in our life and we go to work, are we fully there? No, we're not, because we may have something going on at home that's hard, something with our kids or our spouse. So how are we telling kids that forget about it, just focus on your assignment, right? So I think we really need to put ourselves in their places, that we have a hard time. So of course they're going to have a hard time. Here's my third thing around learning loss. The standards and curriculum that have been built in schools have evolved, but they're still based on a system from 100 years ago. And so when we have these standards and this idea that our kids need to know these specific standards by third grade, understand that there's actually a lot of flexibility, and our kids learn differently, and they don't learn the same pace. And our schools have been built to be mass and standardized and industrialized. But every child in general, even when school was functioning normally, they were still somewhere behind and somewhere ahead, because it's very arbitrary. It's not an actual number. We have just had a bell curve and taught people who are in the middle. We've forgotten the people here, and we've forgotten the kids here, right? So I think we have to shift that mindset. Now, if your child is learning to read, that's something that of course you can do at home. But to sit here and have anxiety and fear around it, it's the same that if we're in a job and we would be concerned we're behind on that promotion. Is that really a priority right now, right? We're all just trying to survive. And so I think we need to have that same mindset with our kids and know that they are going to be okay, check in with them. They're going to be just fine. They're going to get the A through G requirements that they need. But right now, the most important thing you can do for them is check in with them. If you come from a place of fear, you're only adding to the fear that our world is going through right now.
So now coming back or coming to the current issue,
Yeah.
as far as college admission is concerned. So
Yeah.
what are the advice or tips, you can give, specifically to the parents, and then of course we'll talk about, the children or the students to get into the good college or to get into the college. I mean, we will talk about, I also want to talk about, that some, parents, and especially Indian parents, they're pushing so hard, their children to get into the good school,
Yeah.
and
I
so
know. I understand.
so we can talk about, I like to, you talk about that also. So
Yeah.
please.
Yeah. Okay. So let's first just address, parents who are maybe concerned with their kids and going to college and they're in the system and they're trying to get them through. It's super valid. Okay. So if they are, so my first question would be twofold that I would ask your kid. I would love for you to sit down with your child and first list all of their interests. What do they like to do? What are they excited about? So get all those interests down. And then I would have them write down all their skills, which is different from your interests. What are skills of your child that they have? Maybe, they're a strong leader, or maybe they're really organized, or maybe they know how to team build and they can convince anyone to join their team. What are those skills? And then I would look at those skills and interests. And then whatever college, beyond the college name, first let's think about major, right? What does your child want to major in? Now, I will say something transparently, and not every Indian parent's going to like this, but I will say that I did biology. But I knew I didn't want to be a doctor, but why did I do it? Because I thought that was my only choice. Right. So I would say there's so many majors out there. And nowadays, what jobs are looking for is someone who's a bio major that has a business background. They are looking for people that are diverse. They don't want just linear. So I would really push for majors and really go, okay, you've always been really interested in building things. Okay, sure, your first mind might go engineer. But maybe it's not engineering. Maybe it's about being in a creative major and learning for them to tinker and build things and figure out what that means for them. I would really encourage parents to also ask their kids about if they want to minor in something. So if they're majoring in something based on their skills and interests, then also go ahead and think about a minor that's actually exciting for them. Maybe they're really interested in philosophy or world religion. Encourage them to do those things and don't think it's going to take away from their career. Actually give them that because they want to learn. Let them learn, right? That's why they're going. It's not always about the career, it's about their interests. So
Or
that would be
making money.
yes, it would be about the major, right? Because I think a lot of kids get lost. So I think if parents can support them and not put their own expectations on the kid, but maybe do that exercise, that's good. Because here's another thing. Once you know the major, then you know what colleges are good with that major, right? So then you can start going, okay, well, what these colleges are known for, what majors? Okay, maybe then you should apply to this one. And here's my second thing. And again, you don't have to take my advice, but what I will say is this: sometimes we push so much of the brand name of the college,
Yep.
we forget what the college will give and offer your child. So guess what? Some children, they're not going to thrive in a 30,000 person school. They're just not. They rather go to a smaller school, build a network, know all the teachers there, get to know the professors, work in classes of 10, and that's really what your child needs. And yes, maybe in society, no one will say that's a good school that your child should go to. But if your child feels fulfilled in that, then maybe that's more important. So
Yes.
that's something to think about as well. And I will say one more thing: our world is changing. Maybe for some industries, maybe medical school, or certain things, it is based on brand name. There's a reality to that, right? Whatever
Right.
college
Yeah.
your kid goes to, they're going to look at that. But a lot of nowadays, it doesn't really matter. It matters more about your experience, your skill set, your creativity, your innovation. That's what matters, not just the brand name of your college. Because more and more what we're seeing is some kids are not going to college and still successful, right? So everything's changing. And I know as an immigrant, you want to push certain standards, but I would say try not to push the name so much. Actually look at what these schools offer and see it from that perspective before you jump to you have to apply to these 4 Ivy Leagues and UC Berkeley and UCLA, right? So give your kid choices. Give choice.
Good, good.
Yeah.
Rama?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. It's true. In fact, when my kids just last year, my kids went through the whole process, and I know that they actually, one of them, I won't give names because I think they'll kill me if they if they know what. But one of them basically took the topmost, what he thought was his topmost college out of his list, because it just did not have enough flexibility. He could not have gone there. He would be boxed into the major he had thought of. And what if he wanted to change and he wanted to have something, some opening? So he actually knocked it off his list. That was one. The other one did the same for probably one of the Ivy League universities, which was not the top of his list, but it was still very much there. And he looked at it and compared the curriculum in the field that he was looking for with some of the other universities that he was applying to. And he said, why should I be spending my time writing 4 essays, slogging my butt off for this particular school when I don't believe I will want to go there? So that got off. So I know exactly what you're talking about. And it's true. Parents really do need to think like that. And the children do need to do so too. But anyway, enough. This is not about me. It's about you. So let me ask my next question.
Oh, I was going to say, though, it's so amazing that you empowered your kids to kind of shift and be okay with that, right? So I hope if parents, if someone's like, I don't want to go to this college anymore, a parent can go.
Well, they have to be happy. And with everything that we hear about mental health and whatever else, and they're on their own as they're young adults, I don't know. I think it's more important that they be happy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But anyway, but you're talking about your book basically. So thank you for giving us that overview as to what parents should be thinking about and how they should really approach the college application process. And your book addresses the importance of changing the education system, right? And you talk about consciousness and mindfulness and so on. But what about students who are already in the system? So now that we're talking about the college application cycle, so let's go a little further. Let's dig a little deeper there. Seniors who are applying to college, right? What kind of advice would you give to the students? How can they use consciousness or mindfulness in that process of applying to colleges?
Yeah, well, first, I just want to empathize because it's stressful. And as someone who's been through the process, it's very difficult. The first thing I would say is, I would have a reflection exercise for every senior who's applying to college. And I would really have them sit down and go, what do I want? What do I want out of college? Why am I going? And that's a scary question, but why? Why are you going? What's the reason for it? And if it's just a blanket statement, well, it's going to get me a job, maybe you're not going deep enough. So really try to understand why. I want to learn about X, Y, and Z. I want to really build a community of people who understand this about me. Great. I want to pursue my interest in a dance team and this and this. Great. Whatever it is, but really sit down and think about that. For anyone who's doing it, the reason why I bring that up is sometimes we forget to become conscious of ourselves. Right. And so sometimes we're doing it just because we've been told, but we actually don't know why we're doing it. And so I think it's really important for every child to really try to understand that for themselves, and if that means that they come out of it going, I think I'll do better in a community college for 2 years and then transfer, that's okay. Maybe it's my why is right now, I really just want to be around my family because they're going through some things and I just need to be home. That's okay. Right. So figure out that why and what it is. My next thing would be conscious of how much of what you're doing in your application process is based on what others have told you and because your peers are doing it and you're comparing yourself to them. I tell every young person, the thing that makes you unique is you, right? That's it. You are unique because of you. So maybe your friend is in their essay is writing about this. That does not mean you have to write that too in yours, right? And so I think sometimes as seniors, it's really easy to get wrapped up in what others are doing and what your college counselors are telling you, but really sit down with yourself and think about consciously, what do I want to write about? What is a story that I really want to tell, right? And really talking about those moments, like when I applied to college, I talked about Bharatanatyam and like how that changed my life growing up, right? I talked about doing a breast cancer walk and what that experience was like for me. So that would what I mean by conscious. And another thing I would just tell young students is just really check in with yourself, and you're going to feel the pressures. And so really understanding how can you be mindful in those moments, and just know that your value is not based on what college you get into. And that's hard because we've been told that our entire life. But just know that if you don't get, I didn't get into UC Berkeley. I didn't get into UCSD. I didn't get into UCLA, but I still had to realize that I'm still valuable. That just because I didn't get in doesn't mean that I'm not the cream of the crop of society. And so I hope seniors have that consciousness and awareness when they're applying. I always say, put your intention, work hard, and then whatever happens is not in your control anymore. So just let it be. And just whatever happens is meant to be. And that's where you're meant to go. And it'll be great no matter what. And once you go into college, you forget about all the brand names anyways. You're like, I got in, I'm good.
So, coming back to the things about the Indian parents, I mean, I have noticed that, the doctor,
Yeah.
especially the husband and wife are the doctor, directly or indirectly, consciously or unconsciously, they are pushing that child to become a doctor.
Yeah.
And the same thing is about the engineering and so forth. I mean, we have talked about this a lot in our magazine and so forth, but I think, you coming as from an education background and writing a book, if you can talk about that one more time, it definitely will be good.
Yeah. This is what I'll say. I understand why parents say that. Because when you have immigrated from another country, you were in survival mode and you needed to make money and you needed to support your family. So you had to do whatever it took. And at the time, the jobs that were stable and financially secure happened to be doctor and some other ones. And so I understand where they're coming from. But you also came to this country to let your kids fly. That's why you came here. You came here to give them opportunity. And if the opportunity is only based on what your options were, then that's not opportunity. You're still caging them in. So put yourself out of this, take your ego out of it, and understand that if your kid doesn't become a doctor, they can still be financially secure. They will still be accepted by society. And I think what I would encourage parents to do is to ask themselves, what was something they wanted to pursue that they never got to because they didn't have a choice? And how did that feel? Right? Because if that did not feel good, then why are you putting your child through that pressure one more time? Right? How can you break the cycle? And understand that you also wanted to pursue your dreams and you never got that option. My mom went back to college at the age of 54. She was a stay-at-home mom her whole life because that was the only option she had when she came to this country. They couldn't afford a babysitter. So now she went, now I'm going to go do what I want to do. And she became a teacher and she's much more happy. Right. And so I think it's important for parents to know that generationally, if we don't question ourselves, we're going to continue putting the pressures over and over again. But at what cost? At what cost? You put your child and become a doctor, everyone at their wedding and society will be like, good job, your kid's a doctor. But if they're coming home and they're unhappy, then what's the point?
Right.
And so it's really trying to separate yourself from validation. And I think in the Indian culture, it's like what Hasan Minhaj said, right? Like, lok kya kehte hai, or like, what are they saying all the time? And we're a culture like that where we care a lot about what others think. And I think at the point where we can kind of detach from that, and I'll give a personal story. My brother was going to be an accountant that I was going to be a doctor. And my brother became an actor and moved to
Wow.
Hollywood, and I became a teacher.
Wow.
And my parents were horrified because my dad was going, I came to this, what are you doing? I came to this country and gave you all of this, and you're going to undergrad, and now what are you doing, you know? And now my parents are going, oh, I get it. I get it. Because every day my kid wakes up and they're excited. They're excited to go after their dreams. They actually care about serving the world in a way, and they're determined and they're creative, and it's actually helped them change their mindset. They're now going, well, what makes me happy? I never got to ask that question growing up. Now I can maybe do that because my kids are showing that to me. So know that there's a lot of growth that can happen once we break out of some of that generational keep going, you know?
Yeah, which makes a lot of sense because you're trying to break out of a mold, etc.
Yeah.
But yet, but still, having said that, how do you have certain ideas that are so deeply entrenched inside your mind, right? And this whole process of consciousness and the growth mindset or mindfulness, that requires a certain amount of unlearning, right? That's you say that you use that concept in your book as well. But when you have so much ingrained in your mind, you're already halfway through the system, you're ready to move from one school, high school, and move on to college. How do you unlearn what you've already learned? And wouldn't it be better to just go along with the system so that, you are not at a disadvantage in some way? How do you, isn't there a conflict basically?
There is. Yeah. And it would be a lot easier to be in the system. I'm not lying. I'm not going to sit here and say that's like, it's, it is. It's easier. I did it. I was in the system. I did just fine. Right. So I think it is easier. And I think I will say one thing, unlearning is a choice. So it is a conscious choice. You have to want it, and you have to understand it's going to be uncomfortable, and you understand that it's going to take time. And I didn't think I would go through any of that. I thought that this is what it was like to be a good student, and you go to a good college and you do well, and I didn't know any different, and no one had pushed me to think differently. But I think for me, when I had to sit in front of kids where the system was not serving them, that's when I had to unlearn, because I had to go, these are children, and we are completely pushing them out because they are not working within the system. So we are doing something foundationally wrong, that they are so unfulfilled and unhappy, right? So I had to go through that because I was faced with it. And I think for most people, it's going to be really hard. And I think the question, though, again, I'll always say is, in the moment, it is easier, always. But for how long? Because it's going to get harder, right? How long are you going to convince yourself when you go to bed that I'm fine and everything's okay? For how long? Right? Because one day, for most people, and this we've heard it over and over, they hit rock bottom, they have a midlife crisis, they go through some sort of divorce or grief, and then they open up, what am I doing? So my question is, are you going to wait for that, or are you going to start now? And that's a choice, because inevitably you will break down, right? That is life. When things are not aligned, eventually you will be broken down and you'll have to question yourself, and it's going to be deeply painful. So can you start that process now? Now, does that mean that if someone right now is preparing for college, that they should just be like, college is not important? No, because that's unrealistic, right? So it's like consciousness also is just the little steps. It's the little things, right? So I hope fundamentally we can create a system that doesn't necessarily push college as the end all be all, but as an option. I hope one day we can get there. But I also understand we're not there now. So how do we just start asking even ourselves our why? Why are we doing this? Does this align with me? Am I excited about this? Am I only doing this because my parents want me to, or do I actually want to do that? Right? So that's where we can start that journey. But again, it's a choice, because it's much easier to just be ignorant and just kind of go through it. And that doesn't mean that person is ignorant. It's just easier to just not think about it and just keep going.
So, Komal, I got your book, but I got a Kindle version.
Okay.
So if you have the book, with you, the actual copy. And if you want to put it up on the screen,
Oh yeah, is it okay if I get up to go get it?
please go ahead.
Okay, let me just stop the video for 1 minute.
Okay, I should have told you that before.
Here it is.
Okay, all right.
So it's called Raise Your Hand to Call for Consciousness and Education. Yes, I always tell people, if you're ready to change the education system, you have to raise your hand. But yeah, this is the book, and it's on Amazon, Kindle, and paperback. And it's been amazing to just hear from people, actually people who are not even teachers or parents, sharing about how this is making them question their own lives in some ways. And so it's exciting to kind of hear that. I think this book can be for a lot of people who are just trying to see a new way.
I mean, just to plug our Desh-Videsh, in the next issue of Desh-Videsh, we're going to publish a review of your book.
Amazing, thank you.
Yeah. Rama, you had a question?
So, yeah, I had a question about consciousness versus mindfulness, right? You spend a lot of time talking about consciousness and you spend some time talking about mindfulness. And we do hear, I remember hearing mindfulness to be in a lot actually in my kids' school as they were graduating and so on, especially in high school. So what would you say is the difference between the two concepts?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say consciousness is a state of awareness, and I would say mindfulness is a tool to get you there. So mindfulness is when you sit down and you're closing your eyes. And for a lot of us, we're controlled, or not controlled, that's the wrong word, but we operate through our minds. And so when we sit down and we calm our mind down, it's when we, for the first time, maybe are here, right? We're not going downstairs to the kitchen thinking, what am I making for dinner? And what are we going to do this weekend? And next week we need to do this. You're just here. And so that's what mindfulness is. And one thing I would push, I think in our capitalistic society, we use mindfulness as a way to tell people, this is how you relieve stress. This is how you become more productive. And what I would push people to instead say is mindfulness is a way to connect back with yourself. And I think if we message it that way, then it doesn't become this result. It just becomes something you do because you want to live in a life of awareness, and you want to be here, and you don't want to live the rest of your life always go, 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 that you forget to stop and actually enjoy what's right in front of you.
Well, thank you very much. Rama, you have any more questions?
I not for now. I mean, that way I have hundreds of questions, but I don't think we have so much time.
Right, yeah. So, on behalf of Desh-Videsh readers and viewers, I like to thank both of you taking a time, obviously in a busy schedule, and we really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. This was so fun. I'm so glad I got to speak with both of you.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed this thoroughly too. So thank you for the opportunity.
No problem.